I got to ask you, John, and be honest with me. Have you ever barked at someone because of Georgia football?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Was there?
Ooh.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into Monkey Knife Fights College Football Preview Show, Week 11 edition. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me, as always, the great John McKechnie from Rotowire.com, who I believe is even at Rotowire HQ, looking very professional this week. I mean, I guess lot to celebrate. Congratulations to you and your dogs after that big win, reminding us what we've really all known all along this entire season, that it's Georgia's world. We're just living in it until someone knocks them off. What's your big takeaway from last week?
Oh man, and yes, our dear viewers, do not adjust your YouTube screens. That I do have a nice background this week. I'm coming to you live from Rotowire HQ. But yeah, last Saturday was a complete whirlwind. I tweeted out at the noon kickoffs, like, I might watch Little Nicky instead of these games. Like, it was really bad to start the day, but after that, once we got to the 3:30 kickoffs, Georgia, pretty emphatic performance, I thought, over Tennessee. I thought if they were going to win, they would have had to obviously slow Tennessee's offense. I don't think Georgia wins in a shootout type of scenario against the Vols, but they kept Tennessee, in third and long throughout the game, really prevented their offense from converting those first downs, sustaining the drives. And, the game was basically choked out by the time that we got to halftime. And then, that game bleeds right into LSU Bama, which delivered a complete classic. That was such a fun game. Just wild what LSU and their turnaround has been basically since we left them for dead after they lost to Tennessee at home at the beginning of October. And then your boys, Dan, how about that? Knocking off Dabo's Clemson Tigers.
I know. We got the Marcus Freeman signature win already in year one. And I mean, if you would have told me, John, last year that on the same night, Alabama or Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman and the Fighting Irish would knock off both Alabama and Clemson and give us, for the first time in the playoff era, that neither one of those schools are in the top six, I would have said you're taking crazy pills, my friend.
Yeah, especially after, you looked at how things were shaping up after September. It's like, oh boy, did both of these schools make a critical error? But now I think both fan bases have to feel like, oh, they have their guy. So just a wild weekend in college football. USC obviously got the scare from Cal in the late window, everything like that. So, I mean, last weekend was about as good as you could have hoped. It really did deliver as far as those big marquee matchups were concerned.
So I got to ask you this question. I can't remember if I've asked you before in the past, but just because this started kind of circulating and making the rounds this weekend and kind of felt like people were making a big deal of this, I got to ask you, John, and be honest with me. Have you ever barked at someone because of Georgia football?
Yeah, hell yeah.
was there was there any barking in the McKechnie household this past week?
Oh, I'm sure my neighbors were very concerned. It's like 4 PM, and they're like, what's going on down there?" But I think that speaks more to my apartment not having the thickest walls or insulation or what have you. But yeah, I mean, I don't understand why this is like a new thing that people get upset about Georgia fans barking. We don't have a song like Rocky Top, and calling the dogs, it takes a while for the momentum to build. So what we got in our back pocket at all times is a bark, and we're going to give it to you, especially when we beat the team that's the number one ranked team by the playoff committee. Like, of course we're gonna let that rip.
Well, bark away. I mean, I think the rain and like the rain that started in that second half and how the weather got, I think that kind of saved Tennessee from just getting full on embarrassed. And they lucked out, and they're still top five. And it feels like the window is wide open for them. And the pathway is very clear for them to get into the playoff, regardless of what happens here down the stretch.
So, I mean, yeah, the committee is still respecting them, putting them, one spot out. You have a situation where Ohio State and Michigan, they could potentially knock each other out of the postseason. And, the odds makers seem to think that TCU is going to lose this weekend by a touchdown. So that clears off another spot there potentially. So we'll have to see how things continue to develop in the Pac-12 if they can get someone in. They need Oregon, it feels like at this point, but USC can obviously make a charge here and log a couple more impressive wins. UCLA and then the Pac-12 championship. All of that could be in front of them as well. But yeah, I mean, Tennessee definitely still in good shape. It's kind of rare for a team to not play in its conference championship and make it. Usually you need that kind of Alabama cachet in order to make that happen. But the way that the chips are falling this year, it's certainly possible for Tennessee.
Yeah, we'll get to TCU in a minute. We'll do a full breakdown of that matchup with Texas on Saturday night, as the nation's eyes will be on the Horned Frogs this week. But let's go back to Oregon here, and let's talk about our guy Bo Nix, or as he shall formally be known from now on as Bo Heisman. Becomes the third Duck all time to have a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and a receiving touchdown in the same game, joining that fantastic trio of Joey Harrington and Marcus Mariota, continuing his revenge tour. John, if there was a comeback player of the year award in college football, it would go to Bo Nix. I mean, what more can we say about our guy this year?
It's insane. And then, I think especially when you kind of track this all along, obviously he goes to Auburn, things don't work out, even though he's kind of like the promised one there with his dad having played at Auburn. He's a 5-star quarterback. It just doesn't really go well there on the Plains. And then, Coach Lanning stops shy of naming him the starter over the summer. Like, all throughout fall camp, it was possible that Ty Thompson was going to win that job. And, everyone's really looking side-eyed at Bo Nix at that point. And then the first week happens. Oregon gets, steamrolled on national television in a neutral site game against Georgia. And it's like, okay, all right, well, I think the book is closed, all that stuff. And for him to have caught fire the way that he has, that offense is humming, and they don't really have star players beyond Bo Nix, but he's just making everything work. A little bit rude of Oregon to really just need to do that against Colorado. Colorado's had enough bad things happen to them this year, but alas, Nix has definitely put together such an unreal season, especially relative to expectations.
Yeah, I think he's sitting at plus 800 on the Heisman odds right now. Might want to throw a few shekels towards Bo Nix's way there. But, I made the mistake on Twitter of just liking so many Bo Nix related tweets over this past weekend that now my timeline is literally just all Oregon. Like, it's like 90% Oregon Ducks propaganda at this point is basically what I'm going to call it, because it's gotten to the point last night where I just went down the tunnel and just went down through the rabbit hole. And now I'm seeing the tweets of, yeah, when we get to the playoff and we get Georgia again, it's going to be different. Bo's playing great. It's like, okay, so what? You might lose 38-13 this time and not 45-3 or whatever it was in week one.
Yeah, I mean, Pac-12 Twitter, if you're unfamiliar with it, listeners on the East Coast or in the Midwest, Pac-12 Twitter is wild. Like that's really a sect of Twitter unto its own. I know some Pac-12 folks, and yeah, they're a different breed of cat out there. And yeah, the Ducks fans in particular, like you said, you've really, you kind of just dipped your toes, but pulled right in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm basically waddling right in there like a duck, just floating of that Twitter sphere there. And we'll get UCLA fans have been chiming in as well. We'll get to that in a little bit in 5 Furious Questions, but I do want to give Brian Kelly some props there. I mean, I'm sure he is walking around the campus in Baton Rouge this week with a wheelbarrow to just wheel those giant cojones around after that call to end that game. Good for them. He said all the right things this week too. He's talked normally as he said them. What did he say on that 2-point conversion play? He said before the game started, if you had asked me, hey, I'm going to give you one play, and if you're successful on that one play, you beat Alabama, I'm taking that 100 times out of 100. So that's why they went for it. And then he was asked if it was the biggest win of his career, and he responded with, the biggest win of my career is going to be when we win a national championship. So Brian Kelly actually saying the right things now too. So maybe LSU is for real.
They just might be unreal. After they had the dream season in 2019. The last couple of years didn't go well. This year, as we've said, did not start particularly well. But beating Alabama, especially a team that, Alabama is like the one squad that could go into Tiger Stadium confidently every 2 years and feel pretty good about their chances of winning. And for LSU to pull it together, just unbelievable. Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated used to be the beat guy for LSU. He introed his game wrap article on Twitter, and he ends it with on Brian Kelly and his boudin balls, and that I thought that's the lead of the century of the week right there. The good stuff from old Ross Dellinger.
Absolutely. And you know what? Let's go right into five furious questions now, and let's talk about Alabama to start this off. Question one for you, John. Are we witnessing the end of Alabama's dynasty / is Nick Saban's era of dominance over?
So this is a question that comes up, anytime that Alabama loses. When you have them lose twice, it feels a little bit, more serious. I did see a major outlet tweet something to the effect yesterday that was like, you don't want to see an angry Nick Saban on the recruiting trail. It's like, we already see what Nick Saban does on the recruiting trail. It's not like Bama's gotten all this way by not having the #1 recruiting class most years. They have 2 of the top 5 recruiting classes on paper of all time. By the way, one of them, the #1 all-time recruiting class at the time, 2021. Those guys are on the team right now. Those guys are true sophomores right now. They should be contributing. They should not be contributing to a 2-loss team for Alabama. They should be the ones that are just kind of making this one of the next in line mythical Alabama squads. So I had to laugh at that one. The idea that this somehow is going to light some fire in Nick Saban, like, and have any sort of meaningful impact. Like, that guy's already angry all the time anyway. He's angry when after he wins a national championship because he's losing hours recruiting. So I had to tee off on that one a little bit. But as far as whether this is the beginning of the end for Alabama, I mean, no one outruns Father Time. I think that there needs to be something done about the coordinators. They've hated Pete Golding there in Tuscaloosa for a while, as far as that Bama fan base is concerned. And I don't think that Bill O'Brien is all that inspired of an offensive coordinator. You do have to ask yourself, though, when's the next time that they are going to have a Bryce Young level quarterback? And I think that's a fair question. He'll be gone after this year, of course. So how the succession plan works at quarterback is going to be really important for them. And if Saban doesn't find his next, proverbial Bryce Young, and we start to see some middling quarterback play there at Alabama, then we start to see them look human, and it's not as shocking as it tends to be right now whenever they end up in the losing column.
Yeah, and then you have Greg McElroy, of all people, too, saying that Nick Saban might be done sooner rather than later because of how NIL is structured right now. But it wouldn't surprise me one bit if Saban figures that out too and just becomes the king of NIL deals and then uses that transfer portal that's now wide open and gets a quarterback in there in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, every little kind of new innovation in college football, you gotta give Saban credit for it, is he's caught up to it. Like Bama's early title teams when he was there built on defense and running the football. Once that became less of like the instant ingredient to winning a natty, he switches. He goes to more up tempo, mobile quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts in 2016 got them to the natty, but obviously they lost to Deshaun Watson. They bring Tua in from Hawaii. He wins the national championship in 2017. So he's been on the cutting edge in a lot of ways. And he drops the subtle hints at SEC Media Days about how much money Bryce Young had gotten before he even played a snap as the starter for Alabama in the summer of 2021. So I feel like that they're already kind of at max capacity as far as like those new trends that they bring in. Some transfers, and some of them haven't been all that great this year. They bring in Vanderbilt's left tackle. Apparently that didn't work out so good. Tyler Harrell, for my purposes here at Rotowire, I ranked him really high as far as fantasy production was going to be. I thought he was going to be like Jameson Williams. That didn't work out. Jermaine Burton has been basically nothing since the first game of the season. So they're using the transfer portal. You can't count on that. I think maybe that's a lesson that Saban will learn.
All right, next question. Scale of 1 to 10. How concerned are you about the Ohio State Buckeyes after 2 not so stellar weeks?
I'd say moderately, but I do feel like their best game is about as good as anybody's. I think it was a slog last week in Evanston. We saw the weather. And Ryan Day was pretty resolute during the pregame. He was like, we're still going to run our offense, and they should have changed things up a little bit to cater to the weather conditions there. But Northwestern gave them everything that they could have possibly mustered. It was a sleepy day in Evanston, an 11 a.m. local kick. So I'm not going to grade Penn or Ohio State too harshly for that one. They're favored by like 40 points against Indiana this week, so that seems to think that no one's overly concerned about this Ohio State team. But I am starting to entertain the idea more so that game at the end of this month could end up being a loss for Ohio State. I'm entertaining the idea of Michigan maybe getting 2 in a row on the Buckeyes.
Interesting. Yeah, I just feel like they're sleepwalking into that game right now, just kind of just rolling the ball out there, and then we'll worry about Michigan when we get to Thanksgiving week in a couple of weeks. All right, moving on. Question 3: do UCLA fans have a legit gripe for being ranked behind USC in the playoff committee rankings, or are they being the crybaby fan base of the week?
I think that there's some ways in which UCLA can have their complaints. I think they've had, but on balance, a bit of a tougher schedule. And the SP Plus rankings actually say that UCLA is about 8 spots better than USC. So, I mean, if you want to go with like a data-driven argument, if you're a UCLA fan, then I think you do have one, because that kind of is the end-all, be-all team metric in college football. A lot of the times is SP Plus. So I think it's legit, but you cry about it now, but you get to have your say in this argument on the field here in a few weeks. So it'll take care of itself, basically.
Yeah, this one's kind of making me laugh. The only thing on Twitter that's making me laugh more than the UCLA stuff is the Ohio or the Michigan fans that are mad that they're ranked below Ohio State. It's like, in 2 weeks, you guys are going to get to settle this on the field, right? We don't have to just scream at each other on Twitter, but that's what we do. And as you mentioned before, John, Pac-12 Twitter, especially after dark, is just a place where if you've never been there before, maybe go with a friend, because it can get a little scary in that area. All right, moving on. Question 4: who has the biggest chance of a letdown coming off of last weekend? LSU, Notre Dame, or Georgia? All 3 of these schools coming off those big wins, and they head on the road this week. LSU at Arkansas, Notre Dame at Navy, Georgia at Mississippi State.
Well, it's funny. Like 2 of those teams are have road matchups against teams that are very funky to prepare for. In Notre Dame's case, Navy, this is a bad Navy team, first of all. So I think that things will be fine for Notre Dame, but it's an uncomfortable 60 minutes when you go up against a triple option team. And then on the other end of that, Georgia has to travel to Starkville to play against a Miss State team that gave them some trouble when they played each other 2 years ago in Athens. And, basically Georgia's pass defense is going to have to come correct. We know that Mike Leach is not going to have chairs available for his wide receivers, so they'll be standing up, they'll be game ready, all that good stuff. So we'll see. We'll see as far as how much of a struggle it is for Georgia. They are, just 17-point favorites, so like not a massive spread that we might see for, if Georgia was playing Arkansas, for example, if they were playing at Texas A&M on the road at this stage. And LSU, they just need to take care of business. This is unfortunately an Arkansas team that is way underperformed expectations to this point this season. I think a lot of people are excited about them. Hasn't worked out that way, but I think LSU is rolling right now. I put them at the bottom of my list of teams I'm concerned about coming off those big wins.
Yeah, Notre Dame, as much as I enjoyed that win against Clemson last week, it also at the same time was just making me more angry because of just the complete letdowns and no-shows that they had against Marshall and Stanford. If they just showed up in those 2 games, Notre Dame would probably be top 6, top 7 right now in the country, actually making a legit case for a playoff spot after how they played against Ohio State at the beginning of the year and how they knocked off Clemson last week. And as we talked about a little bit, that they can fully embrace the role of spoiler, and they basically ended Clemson's season. And in a couple of weeks, they'll have a chance to probably end USC's season as well if the Trojans get by UCLA next week. So yeah, that game just made me more angry than anything else.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. When you have those games like the Marshall one and the Stanford one, like it completely changes your perspective on the entire season. It's like, wow, we are apparently very far away from being good. And then you just like the mix and match of extremes that the Notre Dame has had this season, but between those games and then, like you said, last week or playing Ohio State close, it's figure it out. Maybe do the same thing 2 weeks in a row instead of just like having these like just wild swings.
Yeah, I've said this before. Marcus Freeman, to me, it seems like he is a hell of a big game coach. But then you get those kind of sneaky, sleepy weeks, and he just doesn't put in as much preparation, and he can't get his guys as fired up to play. The Stanfords in their current state, the Marshalls as they are. Cal gave them fits. But then they'll go out and they'll beat North Carolina, who's got a great offense. They did that on the road. They'll beat Clemson. They hang in with Ohio State. And now you have 2 weeks with Navy and Boston College, who are both not very good this year, before the USC game. So we'll see what Notre Dame does the next couple of weeks. Anyways, moving on. Last question I got for you. Your thoughts on the latest antics from our guy, Mike Leach, throwing all the chairs from his wide receivers off, and then this post-game rant about how his players would rather I'm paraphrasing here, but basically sip on lemonade and eat a fish sandwich with their fat little girlfriends out by a tree instead of prepare for a football game.
I mean, what can you say? I mean, he's really reaching into his bag when he pulls out the fat little girlfriends comment. I believe he's done that before. The fish sandwich is one that one was newer to me. Maybe that's that exists somewhere in the Leach lexicon. But I expect a little bit more from Leach in the sense that I don't expect him to say the same thing twice. So I thought he could have done a little bit better there. But the sentiment certainly lands. He's miffed at his pass catchers with all his drops.
What's going on there? I would like to just go into a wide receiver meeting in Starkville and see what's going on. I mean, after the alligator, what was it? The T-Rex comment he made a couple weeks ago. Now he's taking their chairs away. He's calling them out for other reasons. So, and now you got Georgia coming in. So I don't think it's going to get much better for the Mississippi State wide receivers the next couple of weeks here. All right, moving on. Let's get into a couple matchups here. We don't have lines up yet for the Alabama-Ole Miss game, but I still do want to touch on this one because it's a top 11 matchup. Alabama ranked number 9, Ole Miss at 11. Ole Miss still has a chance to make some noise here if they can somehow pull off this upset this weekend. It's a 3:30 Eastern kick. Alabama is favored by 12 points. The over-under is 64.5. So the odds makers are expecting a lot of points here. Bryce Young is averaging 279 yards per game, John. That's normally where his number is. It's right around there on MKF. Usually it's like in the 290s. And then Ole Miss, when it comes to passing yards they've allowed 222 yards per game. So what do you expect out of Bryce Young this weekend?
I'm gonna go with less here. I think that Alabama, their best path forward offensively right now, I think is on the ground. So I think they're going to try to challenge Ole Miss with that, and their passing game. I think Bryce Young is playing well, but I just think that the weapons, even if it doesn't really align with the star ratings next to a lot of these guys, that's a group that just by and large is underperforming in a pretty big way. And I think that the adjustment that the Tide makes is just not having Bryce Young drop back 40 times. So he certainly could have a good game here, and this is a tantalizingly low number, just knowing how talented Bryce Young is and knowing that these receivers could, potentially click back in, but the evidence suggests the other way. So I'm going to go with less here.
All right, we got Jackson Dart on the other side, who's averaging 212 yards per game. Ole Miss is coming into this one off the bye. Bama's giving up about 199 yards a game. And Dart has a very similar skill set to Jaden Daniels, who finished last week with 182 passing yards on 22 completions. And he also ran for 95. Do you see a dual threat kind of day for Dart here? Saying kind of similar game script to what they just did with LSU did with Daniels a week ago.
Right. So with Dart, Ole Miss doesn't really seem to feel comfortable with letting him go out and rip it. And we saw in that game against LSU for Ole Miss where, Dart looked kind of lost when they had to ask him to drop back a bunch. So I'm expecting Ole Miss to try to get the ground game established, kind of similar side. So I think this is a lower scoring game than maybe the odds makers are anticipating. And Ole Miss, the strength of their offense is definitely the run game, where it's a little bit more debatable when you have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback on the Alabama side of this one. I think Ole Miss, their bread and butter is absolutely with Judkins and Evans. So I'm thinking that this ends up being a little bit less for Dart. I wouldn't be surprised to see a line where he ends up with 175 type of yards.
Fair enough. And since you brought up the running backs, let's talk about Jahmyr Gibbs. He's averaging about 86 yards a game on the ground. He's also doing a lot receiving wise. Mississippi State's run D, Ole Miss's run D is giving up over 150 yards per game. Are you firing up Jahmyr Gibbs this weekend?
Yes, got to go with the more for Gibbs. I know he got vultured at the goal line last week, but I think that as far as the yardage is concerned and fantasy points, I love Gibbs in multiple types of props this weekend.
Which Ole Miss running back would you lean towards?
It's Judkins. It's crazy to think about because Zach Evans was so anointed and seemingly rightfully so as the next star running back and maybe like the best transfer running back this year. It has been Gibbs, and Evans, meanwhile, has been solid when he's gotten the opportunities, but Judkins has just been better and more durable. And I think that Judkins is more so the big factor for Ole Miss right now.
So do you have a prediction for this one? It sounds like you're leaning towards the under for 64.5, but Alabama favored by 12. Last time they lost, they came out and just kind of smacked Mississippi State around. Did they do the same to Ole Miss?
I don't think so. I think that Ole Miss does keep this one close. I do like Ole Miss to cover. I don't think that Bama's punchback this time around is going to be quite as strong as it was against Miss State. So give me the Rebs to make this one a little bit interesting in a lower scoring affair.
All right, very good. Let's head to the Big 12 now. We got TCU at Texas, number 4 at number 18. Texas favored by a touchdown, the over-under 65. Dan Wetzel on Yahoo with a great headline to his column this week. Gary Patterson built TCU football into a winner, and now he's trying to end its dream season. Patterson, of course, now is the special assistant to the head coach in Texas after 21 seasons as TCU's head coach. So he's basically like the Dwight Schrute of Texas football at this point. The special assistant there. This undefeated TCU team, now they got America's eyes on them this week. They're in the national spotlight. I think it's an 8 o'clock kickoff on ABC. This Texas team has lost both of its games against top 11 teams. So does this touchdown line surprise you?
It does. It definitely does. I think that, there's always betting interest on Texas, of course. And, we know that their offense can be very explosive when everything is clicking, when Ewers and Bijan and all those guys have it rolling. But, I think TCU really is for real. So I think that, this is a disrespectful line if you're a Frogs fan. So I think that TCU comes in there. I don't think taking care of business is the right word, but I think TCU goes in there and goes ahead and makes a statement more so and proves to everyone why they belong in the top 4.
All right, and let's talk about their quarterback, Max Duggan. 272.5 is his line on MKF this week. Texas's pass defense ranked 101st in the 101st. Yeah, can't talk right now. They're giving up 261 yards per game. This is his first real chance for a Heisman moment Saturday night. John, are you going all in on Duggan?
It's tough because Quentin Johnson had been just seeing such a huge amount of the targets and really done well with that opportunity. He's dealing with that ankle injury, so even if he's out there, I'm not sure that he is at 100%. And so I think that TCU kind of leans more on the ground game in this spot. Darius Davis and Tay Barber, Savion Williams, those guys are really nice complementary pieces, but Johnson's just kind of like this unquestioned alpha of that receiver room. And without him at full strength, I think that we see a different type of Horned Frogs approach here. So I'm going to go with less.
All right. And then on the other side, we've got Quinn Ewers, 257.5 is his more or less passing yards. TCU's pass defense ranked 95th in the country. They're giving up 251 yards per game. Ewers, when healthy, he's hit this number twice in like 5 games that he's like seen through all the way to the end. What do you see out of him Saturday night?
This one's really tricky. I am going to take the more, however. I think that, this is a full strength Texas team now. And TCU, that pass defense is definitely concerning. I will take more. I think that this is a nice show out day for Quinn through the air.
We'll go with the more for the Texas quarterback. How about the Texas running back, Bijan Robinson? 120 yards is his line, more or less for Bijan.
It feels terrible to go less for him in like basically any number. I am going to do it this time around. I think that we'll see him cross over 120 total yards, but on the ground specifically, I'm going less.
And we got 23.5 fantasy points for Bijan.
Oh yeah, that me likey. Give me the more than 23.5. I think we see him punch it in the end zone at least once, maybe twice, get a few catches in there. Yeah, give me the more.
Throw some mustard on that one. More Dijon, more Bijan on the fantasy
Hey.
prop. All right. And how about a projection or a prediction for this one?
So let's see. I will go with TCU 28 and Texas 24.
Right, I like it. I think TCU is going to pull off this, I guess, technically an upset, even though they're way apart in the standings. But yeah, I like TCU Saturday night as well. I like a little more higher scoring though. I think we're going to get a true Big 12 game than this one, and just defenses do not apply Saturday night in Austin. All right, I don't think we have many other contests up except for the Oregon game right now. So let's talk about Bo Nix. 290.5 is his more or less as they take on Washington. Washington fans started to talk a little bit of smack here on Twitter, as we talked about so much with that Pac-12 after dark. But what's our guy Bo going to do Saturday?
Bo's going to light it up. That's what he's going to do. That's what he's been doing. That's what people in Oregon and Washington do as well. So I think that Nix is in for a great game. And I think that, this type of Washington team, the way that they're throwing the ball too, it's definitely going to keep the pressure on Oregon to keep things rolling through the air. I think that, Washington puts up a good fight here. I know it's like a 2-touchdown spread, but I think that Washington's offense is scary enough to where Oregon's going to have to play this one out all the way. So give me the more for Nix.
All right, very good. Anything else we should have our eyes on this weekend?
We covered a lot of it. I wish that the K-State Baylor game had a little bit more juice to it. Baylor is favored in that one for those keeping eyes on the rest of the Big 12 action. And then just from a sheer fun watch perspective, UNC Wake Forest total is pushing 80 in that one. So if we see Sam Hartman and Drake May deliver the way that they have been, well, Hartman's been falling off a little bit lately, but if he can get back on track and then Drake May keeps doing what he's doing, that's a really, really fun game to keep an eye on during that late evening window.
Are you hopping
Both
on
their lines are at 335.5. FYI.
335.5?
You know what? I think give me the more for both. I think definitely on Drake May, and I think it's, obviously these things are meant to be coin flips, but I think that Hartman taps back in, and UNC's their pass defense can do a lot to help Hartman get there.
Absolutely. Are you all aboard the Drake May hype train? Excuse me, because he is just picking up steam here.
Yeah, I know. I picked a fight on Twitter with a certain blue check, an OG blue check earlier this week, not a Twitter blue check about Drake May. I mean, he does kind of seem to have it all, and the UNC receiving core now that Josh Downs is good, and they've kind of had the other guys that were dinged up earlier in the season start to ascend in their own right. I mean, yeah, May looks legit, and again, my point was it's annoying that every single year we look at the current quarterback class and we're like, oh, but this guy who is not draft eligible would be the number one. It's like, well, we simply don't have to grade those guys on as with as sharp of a pencil. So that was my soapbox. Last year, Bryce Young would have been the quarterback one. Yes, that was true, obviously, but I just get a little bit annoyed. I think it's something where you can't really get enough pushback on because it's a complete hypothetical. But regardless, May is the real deal. I mean, I didn't think that we'd see the quarterback play as good or better than Sam Howell's right away at UNC, but we're getting it.
Yeah, I would just say calm down just a little bit. We've seen UNC have really good quarterback play the past couple of years between Sam Howell, now he's a backup somewhere in the NFL, I think Washington, and Mitchell Trubisky, who was infamously taken ahead of Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson in that draft.
Whoops.
Yeah, whoops is right. One note I will give you guys: University of Miami, the U, since covering in week 1. Against a FCS school. They are 0-8 against the spread since then. But Saturday, they're taking on a Georgia Tech team that's not great. They're getting 1.5. If Tyler Van Dyke is good to go, I think they might actually cover this week.
You're really painting me into a corner here, having to try to back Georgia Tech. But I mean, Miami might just be that sorry right now. They are pathetic. I can't believe it's gotten that far off the rails this quickly under Cristobal.
By the way, the watch party, John, was very awkward.
Oh.
It was very awkward. It was very sad. The Miami fan was basically just calling how bad it was going to be the entire game. And then finally in like the second quarter, when it got to like 28-3, being the nice guy I am, I suggest, why don't we put on something we'll all enjoy? And that's Clemson getting the snot kicked out of them in South Bend. So we watched the Irish game, we watched the Bama game, but yeah, I waited till about the second quarter when it got completely out of hand there.
There you go. I knew you'd be a gracious guest. Did you bring the second TV?
No, I brought burgers instead. So
much better.
Exactly. All right, that's going to do it for us. Don't forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube page at Monkey Knife Fight. Thanks for watching, guys, and good luck on your contests this week.